humans. Welcome to The Frontline, a leadership and business podcast brought to you by Peregrine Corporate Services, an Isle of Man-based fiduciary provider. My name is Martin Hall, and thanks for listening. In this podcast, we chat to an array of business leaders from different sectors to learn more about them, their market, skill sets and knowledge. We hope you enjoy. Today we're joined by Chris from Big ESports. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
No problem, man. Happy to be here.
Appreciate your time. So perhaps just to set the scene a little bit, perhaps a little bit of background to yourself, where you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Early
yeah,
career.
for sure. So I guess judging by my accent, you can probably tell I'm from Australia. And the more I do work with people internationally, the more I am hyper aware of my accent, saying certain words and such. And, for me, I guess coming into the esports industry, I've been here for about 10 to 12 years now as a professional, semi-professional, and started out the same way that many people did who's been in the industry as long as me or longer, which is as a player. So I started off as a top level player in a game and, kind of wanted to test my skills, become a bit better. Started playing in tournaments against other people, climbing through the ranks, and then became a commentator as part of that too, which was on an internet radio station, obviously before internet was good enough to broadcast any kind of video whatsoever, especially in Australia. And then kind of started my career off from there. Got an opportunity to run a $30,000 tournament back in 2010, which landed me my first professional job, full-time job in the industry in 2011. And kind of been working full-time since then in the space in many different capacities. And I like to say that I've sat on all kind of six sides of the fence within esports. So I've done 6 years in PR marketing for two different consumer product companies. I've done about a year and a half as a journalist. And then in between all of those, I was a manager of one of Australia's first professional esports players, probably in the first 10, I would say, who's now a famous commentator and streamer and content creator. I've, ran events. I've been the sponsor of events. I've been the player, managed a few teams, helped to found an esports association a few years back. Was a semi-professional player in Counter-Strike, which was the last game that I played in a top 4, top 6 team in Australia, depending on who you ask, is what answer you get for the ranking. Ended up going out on my own in 2018 to launch business in games, which reformed as Big ESports, where we sit today. So we're in partnership with Australia's largest app and games development studio called PlaySide. And they do a lot of casual games for mobile and also VR for PC and AR for mobile. So for example, one of their latest projects, the Jumanji movie that just came out, if you've got an Apple, you go on the App Store, there's a game, they made that game.
Okay.
They've got a bunch of influencer apps as well, which are their own sort of IP. So they've got a female-focused fitness app that's doing very well in Australia at the moment, a meditation app, and a few others as well. So we're in partnership with them and a poker player and some other private partners too.
And loads to dig in, which I'll go back to in a moment. Just I've not come across the term influencer app. What we consider an influencer app?
So it's not so much that the app is an influencer or such, but it's more so it's influencer-led. Because an influencer is a brand in themselves. And I guess a really easy mainstream example is Chris Hemsworth has his own fitness app. He's known as being, someone who's extremely muscular on screen and obviously knows how to work out. So he's turned that into a business and he's launched his own app, which is kind of, get a body like me. I'll teach you how to be fit. And these two girls, for example, one has a background in kind of nutrition, etc., and the other girl, she has a background in modeling and as well as some very fitness focused content. They've both got, together somewhere between 1.5, 2 million plus followers on Instagram between them. So, they are their own marketing. So it's a major advantage if you're an influencer, if you're launching a brand, especially if you care a lot about it. They're very, very genuine. They're very helpful. You can tell by their content they care. It's not just a cash in. It's not just a, showing off this watch because I've been paid to. They really live the whole thing. They work out every day. They're always on Instagram talking about being healthy and looking after each other and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Okay. So to go back to those early days of gaming, obviously it was just, I guess, as a child, just something you did. Was there a point where, obviously, it's probably a little bit, well, it certainly was a bit before my time, online gaming, that point where it was, you'd obviously play against other people that you felt you were good, and there was opportunities to maybe not use the word make a career of it, but start perhaps making, I guess, winning tournaments or playing in tournaments to win games. What age is that, and what kind of thought process is that? And are your parents going, Chris, come on, do schoolwork? Because you hear that a lot. I don't know, was that going on?
Yeah, a little bit. And look, I mean, it was more realistic in those days, especially because, there wasn't an opportunity to play games at a professional level where you receive, significant income or anything like that, right? Whereas, there more is these days, and there wasn't a pathway. And I mean, it's still, esports as a whole is still quite underground, when you compare to the mainstream market. Yes, there are outliers, who are earning, some good money to play games, but it's still not the same as, the average, what is it, the NFL entry level wage is somewhere like a $300,000, kind of wage, or at least a $300,000 contract when you're drafted to be a starting pick. It's still not like that in most of esports, but you're definitely right. It's a lot of, you're never going to get anything out of playing games. It's just a hobby. You don't spend all your time on it. Obviously, games are very exciting. They can suck you in a lot too. But, even fitting today to where there is a definite possibility for kids coming up today to have a career out of it, it's still always important to have that balance. Even if you're a massive fan of football or soccer, as we call it in Australia, you can't spend 24/7 on that. You need to do a bit of school because if nothing else, you need to know how to do your taxes and things like that too. So, yeah.
You mentioned all the other bits from the 6 sides that you've done. I guess ultimately that education didn't suffer for you as part of that through those teenage years.
It did, definitely. I think in year 11 for me, I think in year 11, a lot just being a lazy teenager doesn't help as well. When you've got something exciting. Yeah, exactly. And, I really picked up my game in year 12, but I did fine in school. And there are some things that games definitely help out with, which is, the ICT and computer side of things.
Yeah.
All of that I did. And then I went into doing an IT traineeship before I professionally worked in the industry. That, all of that knowledge of knowing where to tinker and knowing where to find things, that came quite easily to me. And, was able to, thankfully, the state I was in, the last 2 years of your schooling, year 11 and 12, work fairly similar to university. There's only one mandatory subject, which is a half period in year 11, which is just helping you with resume writing and things like that. But besides that, you literally get to pick to do whatever you want. So, for me, I was quite driven. I wanted to go into the Air Force, potentially, or become a psychologist. So I did the maths, English, science in year 11. And then with sport, as kind of, they call it a blood subject or a fun subject, something that you enjoy. And then in year 12, for me, I did, a little bit more drilling down. I did some physics, which I moved out of. But, I did ICT, advanced into computer-aided design and things like that too. But, you're definitely right that it's important. It's important to focus on schoolwork. And a pro player that I used to sponsor, I was doing a talk back in 2012 or so to 400 high school children at a week-long kind of boot camp. They call it computer games boot camp. They come and they learn about how to work in games, or how to be a pro esports player, or how to be a voiceover artist, or how to make games or market them. And people will talk from all of these different regions and sections. And he didn't want to speak because it was his personal opinion that, hey, finish your schooling first and also do a university degree first. Right. And I think that was relevant, especially for him in that day, because when he was a professional player, our sponsorship of him really was just some money to help them get the tournaments. He wasn't making a salary. But thankfully for him, he finished his electrical engineering degree, became a programmer for a few years, and now he's in a nice paying job over in New Zealand. But nowadays, there's so many more opportunities, and it's because content creators are influencers. They're creating, gamers are content creators and influencers. Because everything's digital native, everything's digital first. If you're starting to get some traction, even if you're not in the highest leagues, you'll have some sort of social following that you can monetize. Often you'll be making your own content. Maybe you'll pick up your own personal sponsorships and such. And this is something that, there are so many things that esports can learn from the traditional sports industry, but this is something that I think traditional sports can learn from esports and gaming. Because if you're not a UFC fighter who's in the top 10 in your division, if you're not an NFL player who was a collegiate kind of star into a major team, no one really knows who the 49th pick on the starting roster of a certain, football team is. And I don't mean nobody. Obviously, their fans do because they're hardcore. But outside of that, people don't know. But in gaming, because the audience is so wide and because you can set yourself apart so much easier through your own personal or personality and also your personal play, even if you're not the best player, you can start to grow a significant following. And, I guess that really brings me into just like a really quick explanation, is the difference between gaming and esports.
Yeah, please. I was going to please.
Yeah, so esports is, it's kind of like the difference between a leisure activity with your friends and a sport. So if you're just kicking a football with your friends down at the beach, that's not a sport. That's just a leisure activity. You're having a bit of fun. But if you were like me, and in the past I played Wednesday night mixed volleyball, I was like 21, I was playing with a bunch of 30, 40-year-olds having some fun every Wednesday. That was sport because we had jerseys, we paid $5 entry fee to play, there was a ladder, we were trying to win. And, the first place prize, there was no cash. All you would get is a little trophy. There's no real bragging rights. And it was B grade, C grade. But it's sport because it's a structured, competitive nature of play. So if you think about the leisure activity of kicking a football, that's just like playing Candy Crush on your mobile, like your son, daughter, or cousin, or nephew or niece playing Fortnite on the iPad or Minecraft, or these kind of casual, very popular games. That's not esports because you're just having a bit of fun. You're just playing around. It becomes esports when it's that structured, competitive nature of play. So even if you're paying a $5 entry fee to just play in a local high school tournament, of which there are many around the world, that's definitely part of it. Or whether you're, paying a massive entry fee or no entry fee at all and you're trying to win $1 million, that becomes esports. The same as sport is anything from, your local footy leagues we have in Australia with their ladders, and you're hoping to get drafted into the professional league and earn a salary. They're the two major differences. But there's, I don't want to get hung up too much on that, but there's so much crossover between what is esports, what is sport, and some people argue that till the cows come home. But usually it's an important distinction because esports is part of the gaming market. It's growing extremely fast. It's something like a 32% compounded growth rate. I believe PwC claimed it is in Australia. I believe that was in their 2018 or 2019 report. It's growing massively year on year globally, according to Newzoo reports. And if anyone wants esports data, Newzoo, which is NEW, then zoo, where animals are, is a fantastic free resource, and they've got paid options as well. It's growing very fast, but still esports as a whole is a $1 to $1.1 billion industry. Gaming in Australia is larger than that, just in Australia. Gaming globally, and I won't get this number perfect, but it's something like 153.2 to 153.7 billion. And these are obviously in USD. But gaming just encompasses so much more than esports. The same way that, NFL only encompasses one part of sports. You couldn't say that NFL is sports, but it's one part of it. There's people who make the stadiums. There's people who do the food and beverages. There's people that make the sticks that go inside the lollipops that are sold at the stadiums. They're all part of that wider ecosystem. There's people that produce the jerseys and the boots and the leather for the footballs and things like that too, that are all part of the industry. So it's just important to understand those two different ones. And doesn't have to always be about esports. The same way it doesn't always have to be about the Super Bowl. There's so much opportunity in NFL, in collegiate. There's hundreds of thousands of people going to collegiate games. There's tons of kids playing in little leagues. There's so much more than just the pinnacle of esports.
So when you, and I mean, just to help with the distinction earlier, you mentioned there about your niece getting on Fortnite and playing Fortnite. If she was in a competition with others for a prize, would you see that as an esport element because there's a bounty there in essence to win?
Yeah, there definitely could be, and that's where, that's where it's always like, what do they call it? Tomato. It's always like, when does it become esports? When is it not? And some people use esports as the buzzword in the marketing ploy, but they really mean gaming, and it can get really confusing. But just understanding that basic distinction, I guess, when you're thinking about it, like, is for example, PlaySide Studios, who we work with, is their game is what they do esports, or is it gaming? Well, it's generally gaming because they're making casual, hyper casual, fun type games where you're just playing on your mobile and you're tapping along and you're earning points and you're having a great time. There might even be a leaderboard in there, but it's not necessarily esports because you're not competing for a prize pool or something like that against someone else.
Yeah, and certainly through lockdown, where obviously certainly sports stopped pretty much globally. Traditional sport, we'll call it. Esports, I know certainly was on, it'd be on TV, streamed on TV. And I'd imagine that was another step in its profile. And I guess you see that, I would like to think you've seen a continued uptick in interest in it, probably based purely, on the fact we're having this conversation, that has been I say not a good thing for COVID, but the fact that people have been at home, realizing that there's more to it than just, as perhaps people think, just some spotty kid sat in his chair at home playing the game.
Yeah, and I think coronavirus has given the opportunity for esports to prove what it can be. we've seen so many like traditional esports get into it in different levels. Like one of the most advanced, I think, is here in Australia, which is the supercars that we have here. And they did a few rounds where literally every single one of their real life drivers played in the esports component. And then they threw in a few extras. I believe it was Lando Norris from F1 that played in it. And then, as far as Formula One goes, we had not the Oz GP, because the Oz GP was, I believe, the first major sporting event to be cancelled because of coronavirus. It got cancelled 2 or 3 hours before it was meant to kick off in the morning for the kind of pre-shows. And, we saw that. We saw the MotoGP come into esports. We've seen NASCAR do a few things in there as well. Mm-hmm. And especially motor racing, getting very hardcore into it. So, obviously it's not all sunshine and rainbows in esports, because once again, that wider ecosystem, like I said, there's venue managers, there's people that do booking and tourism, there's people that do, live event management. There's people that rely on that kind of touring revenue and ticketing revenue to be part of their total income. So there has been a lot of eyeballs on esports as a whole. And the really interesting thing for me is seeing, okay, will that stay around when traditional sports go back? Because the hardest thing is that traditional sports did it as a way to maintain contact with their audience, did it as a way to fulfill sponsor obligations in some cases as well. Like you saw with F1, not the Bahrain had literally every single F1 sponsor. The Supercars broadcast had all the same sponsors, the same commentators, and even the same camera angles. So if you weren't knowing that it was a video game, you could have actually thought it was real, because the graphics are quite decent. But the question is, will that stay around? The thing that has really kicked up significantly is gaming and influencers, and media and people who produce content specifically. That has ticked up massively. There's a lot of esports and gaming news websites out there, like Press Start Australia, which is a news website. I think they reported a 200 to 300% growth in readership over that period of time, and those articles are public if someone would like to fact check those numbers. There's also .esports, which is a global esports news publication. They also received 200 to 300% increase, which was posted by Riyad Shikani, who's the founder and CEO of .esports, or the founder of the holding group that owns them and some other properties. A lot of influencers that we work with have seen anywhere from 100 to 500% growth in their viewership. And also a lot of interest from brands sponsoring directly. So a few ways that these influencers often make their money and their revenue coming through is a lot of them will make money from ads that are served. If you watch a YouTube video, a lot of the time people love to hit that skip ad. Well, the person who created that video is earning a percentage of that money that's coming through, along with YouTube earning that. That's like inherent ad revenue. The other way that they often make a lot of their money is through products sponsorships. So whether they're doing their own ad roll inside their video, whether they're showing off a product. What we've seen is the first of that, which is the Google ads and the self-serving ads. The revenue for that is down 30 to 50%. And that's across Google ads on these news websites and also on these YouTube videos and Twitch streams. But, some of my friends who are running agencies, they've seen a 500% increase in their creators earning money directly from brands.
Right.
And that's been a really interesting thing. One of our clients who spends tens of thousands of dollars per month on Facebook ads, as soon as coronavirus started to shut everything down, they instantly canceled all of their Facebook ads. But at the same time, we're seeing so much more interest from people saying, specifically to us, because of coronavirus and the opportunities created, we want to spend extra money on influencers directly. And I don't know if that's a shift that you'll see in the long term, but it's been really interesting. We haven't seen a 500% jump in money coming through for influencers through us, but we've definitely seen a jump, and that jump has been, in their words, directly correlated due to coronavirus. But at the same time, we've seen some people ease off their sponsorship because of coronavirus. But as a net, it's definitely positive. And it's slightly positive, I guess, for the creators, because their ad revenue, or their CPM as they call it, is down a little bit, but their direct ads, from their brands is up quite a bit.
Yeah. And I guess, influencers in themselves, I presume they ultimately start as a game player, and then it's adding those, you mentioned revenue streams on there, but they come in many formats then, do they? And I presume that industry of where they're coming from, you mentioned there that maybe there's a slight movement now from, say, Google ads or YouTube pay away, if that's probably not quite the right term. What other ways do they try and seek revenue, or what ways are there? Probably a better question.
Yeah, sure. And I think for me too, what I'll do here is I'll highlight some of the numbers. And these are the numbers that I've talked to people like KPMG about. And I love to talk about, a lot of your audience who are the more traditional side of business to put into words why this industry needs to be taken more seriously, and purely just through the dollars, through the revenue. So I've got a friend, for example, and I'll break down his revenue sources. So I've got a friend who turned 22 last week or the week before, and we talk almost every day. He lives with his family. He helps to look after his little brother. He's been creating content on YouTube for around 5 or 6 years, but he had a period of time where he took a break for about 6 or so months in the first year or two for that. But he's been very consistent. He makes somewhere between 4 to 6 videos per week. And now he's just opened up a second YouTube channel. So he's got 2 YouTube channels he operates off. His main YouTube channel has nearing on 2 million subscribers as a whole. His second channel has 60 to 80,000. His second channel, he's about to receive a 6,000 USD payday for purely that CPM side of YouTube for 1 month. 6,000 USD. His overheads are basically zero. So he edits all of his own videos. He records his own videos. He has a manager, but the manager only takes a percentage commission on deals that the manager brings to them or brings to him. Sorry. And that's it. So that's one smaller line of revenue. Him as a whole is looking to make in USD around $500,000 to $800,000 this year after direct costs. And I taught him how to write an invoice 2 weeks ago. He only has a bookkeeper, not a full accountant. I've tried to help him out a little bit with some other contacts because I don't think he understands tax mitigation properly, because he was complaining about his tax bracket. And I was like, what do you mean tax bracket? You're not an employee, you're earning money as a business. And he went, I don't know. We've worked with him. For example, your main running costs, if you're, a business, maybe your rent. He doesn't have any. He lives with his dad, and he supports him, and he looks after his brother. He gave his dad a few $1,000s for his dad's birthday, so it's opposite land in his house. He helps out his family a lot, looks after his brother. He drives a reasonable car. He's saving to buy a house, and he's going to earn 500 to 800K this year in cash in hand before tax, and that's without any, proper tax mitigation policies, and that's without knowing how to write an invoice. And primarily, this is literally from the CPM from YouTube, and this is from brands emailing him saying, "Hey, mate, I'd like you to show off this product. Would you like to show off this app? Would you like to show off this computer?" So we worked with him, for example, to help to work with the brands. We helped him with a $5,000 top-of-the-line gaming computer that was custom modified that he showed off in a few videos, and we paid him for a few dedicated videos on his channel as well. So that's some other ways that he might make money directly from sponsors. So, this is going to show that it's only one case. Not everyone's going to earn that much, but in this industry, it's possible for someone with literally zero business experience, with a hardcore audience and a niche, kind of product, to make $500,000 to $800,000 revenue without seriously knowing what they're doing. And there's no way that someone can just go, I'm going to go and start a dry cleaning business, and all of a sudden wake up, in 2 years and you have $800,000 in revenue without knowing how to do your taxes or have a business or anything like that at all. But it's definitely possible on YouTube. And there's so many people that are doing this. And these are the people that are making a lot of the money in the gaming space. There's 2 people. One are the companies that own these video games, like the EAs and Ubisofts and Activisions, and they're all, a lot of these are public listed companies, so you can look up what their earnings are. And the other one are people who own the content, the influencers. Because if you think about it, some other numbers for you, there's an influencer in Australia called Laserbeam. He has somewhere around 13 to 14 million YouTube subscribers. And that's not including TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, etc. He gets somewhere throughout the coronavirus period around 250 to 270 million video views per month, purely on YouTube, not including Instagram, not including Twitch, not including anything else. Someone like him, if he is a relative size of a Twitch streamer, which is live streaming, you've got some of these guys on Twitch, like Tafui, like Dr. Disrespect, like Tim the Tatman, like Nick Merckx. Some 4 examples there. If someone wants to pause and look these people up, they're very easy to Google. These kind of guys are making about $1.2 million per year purely on paid subscriptions from fans who pay for extra access to them just to be closer to them, just to prove that they're fans. That's not including CPM. That's not including direct sponsorship. That's not including purchased content. That's not including, any other sort of donations directly, which they may receive as well. That's purely off just one line of revenue. Now, obviously, once again, these are the top 10,
Yeah.
15, 20. But this other case I talked to, who's got 1.7 to 2 million subscribers, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of channels like that around the world with 1.7 to 2 million subscribers who are earning similar money.
And the content they're pushing out varies, I assume, like on Twitch, they're perhaps live streaming their game. The content videos that might be, if they're well known for playing X game, they might be giving their followers tips, ideas, that type of thing, and then product placement comes into that process. Then when you talk about the
and the best is natural, right? Like I gave that example before of the two women who have the fitness app. That is their whole life. Their whole life is giving people fitness advice and, telling people look after yourself and you're okay with your body and who you are and etc. So they're like, well, let's turn this into a business. So like a direct and easy example of this is FaZe Clan, FAZE Clan. Their tagline is the largest or most popular esports organization in the world. They have just hit 1 billion total video views on their YouTube in 11 years. Well, they've just hit over 10 years old. They had their 10-year anniversary. They sold $1 million worth of Champion, as in the hoodie apparel company. They sold $1 million worth of Champion merchandise in the first few hours of their drop. And, somewhere around 2 million, I believe, for the whole period of sale for one day within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And because FaZe are, they have a very hardcore audience. They've been around for 10 years, but people have seen them grow up literally from being 16, 15-year-olds playing. A lot of these guys are even 23 now. So when they started, they were 13, 14 years old, but hyper passionate about games. But as they grew up and as streetwear became popular and as rap culture became much more popular in the mainstream, they took ownership of that, and merchandising seems to be a fantastic line of revenue for those kind of guys. Every time they release these kind of products, they're instantly sold out. So you see, when these creators start to make their own businesses and push things that they are truly passionate about, the sales can come through. I mean, another example for you is I know 3 influencers each who released a little figurine type product at $29.99 USD with free global shipping. It was the figurine is kind of a caricature of themselves, so it looks like them but with a bigger head. And they sold 45,000 of those units in 2 weeks at around $1.3 million revenue. Another example of an influencer I know who's got 200,000 Instagram followers. He releases limited merchandise. So every few weeks or a month, he might release a custom designed hoodie in a few different styles and a few different colors, never to be purchased again. Does that style will never be made again, endorsed by him. But that's $1 million business for him. Yeah. Making 7 figures a year, selling those hoodies only in that kind of period.
It's really fascinating because I guess as well, a lot of, or most of them, their followers and their fans is pretty much organic growth. So then they through that, they've obviously got so many eyeballs on them, and you look back at traditional ways of trying to get eyeballs on you, which typically would be marketing and an expense, where you can do this organically, obviously through skills of putting out content, playing the games, etc. But it's just it's fascinating and a real shift. And I guess the internet's part of that generally, which makes me sound really old, but that shift that you can create your own voice and channel so easy.
Yeah, exactly. And you see there's always examples of there's articles all the time, influencers are dead, no one chooses influencers anymore, etc. And there are examples of good influencers and bad influencers. The same reason there's examples of great movies and terrible movies, or very niche movies. There's people to follow for everyone. But, it's the fact of just picking the right ones to work with, which is why I try to focus so heavily on these case studies, which is why I've got, when we work with some clients, I've got 20 case studies I can kind of bring up off the top of my head to explain, these are the people that we know have had sales success because they've got a genuine connection with their fans. There are obviously examples of influencers who are massive on Instagram and they're followed for reasons. Maybe it's drama. Maybe it's they're popular because they're popular. And it very well put by Clinton Sparks, who's a man we do some business with, and he's the head of business development at FaZe Clan, a previous DJ and producer, a lot of contacts to rappers and movie stars, etc. And a thing that I like that he says is you've got people who are popular and you've got people who are influential. And this is a reason why, for example, a lot of movie stars don't receive influencer type endorsements, because Chris Hemsworth has as many 55-year-old mother followers for the way he looks. He's quite attractive. The same way that he has 14-year-old boys following him because he plays a Marvel character, which is nerdy and cool. The same way he might have a 25-year-old male follow him because a 25-year-old male has been watching him as a nerd, speaking as a nerd myself, throughout, the whole period of time as he started all of these different Marvel type movies as well.
Yeah.
So that audience then becomes too broad. You can't be very specific. Whereas we've got some creators who earn, that we work with that earn significant amounts of revenue, but because they have a very niche audience they have a complete control of. Like if you've got a very Australian audience, or let's say you've got, you've got a very mother type audience. You've had a few kids and you're creating vlogs on that. You're telling people, what to expect when you have your first pregnancy and how to dress your baby and things like that. Well, that's hyper relatable to someone because they're like, I'm going through that. I'm going to watch you to learn. And then I'm going to have a connection with you. And then if perchance they release their own baby formula or something like that, there's a potential, quite a large possibility you're going to purchase that because you're like, well, this person has helped me so much. They've provided me with entertainment and they've provided me with value. So the product they're pushing, they believe in that. So I believe in that too. And then it comes through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So to pivot a little bit, just again, for a bit of education on my side, when we talk about esports and one-on-one games, we talk about, and when we chatted previously, we talked about, I call it team esports, or people buying, and I think, again, I use a name that obviously more people will know, where I think Beckham's just recently bought an esports team. What does that mean? Is that a group of people that just play esports within a team? Is that, and they play other teams? Is that how? Can you maybe just give us the basics?
So what I would classify as a traditional esports team, and then for anyone listening can write down some of these names of people like Team Liquid from the United States, Cloud9, who according to Forbes is the largest valued esports team in the world at 400 million USD valuation. Team Vitality, who are from France, they're sponsored by Renault. Team Fnatic from London, who are one of the oldest organizations, that's FNATIC. They're sponsored by Gucci. And a bunch of other brands as well. Another team called FPX, which are based out of China, who are sponsored by BMW. So there's some examples of tier one, as we would call them, traditional esports teams. Now, as a traditional esports team, let's imagine Manchester United, for example, sits at the top. So the brand Manchester United is akin to Fnatic or Cloud9 or someone like that. And then underneath them, instead of Manchester United just having a football team, they might have a football team. They might have a rugby union team. They might have a squad that plays cricket. They might have 3 swimmers and also a freestyle diver. Within an esports team, you might have a Counter-Strike team, which is a group of 5 people that play the game Counter-Strike. You might have an Overwatch League team and even a franchise within that could be called something slightly different. So you're in the 6v6 Overwatch League. You might have 2 or 3 singular Fortnite players, and you might even have some influencers who help represent you sitting underneath. There are a few that have top tier influencers who stream, but purely just representing that brand and are often paid for the exposure they bring towards that team.
Right, okay.
And then what will happen is exactly the same types of sponsorship. So, a brand, say like Corsair, who I used to work for, whose headset I'm wearing at the moment, Corsair might sponsor this Manchester United or this Fnatic, for example. And the same way that, let's say, Nike might sponsor Manchester United. And that means that their runners, their swimmers, when they're walking out to swim, their tennis team and et cetera will all be wearing those Nike runners, and they'll get that access across to all of them. Because a very important thing to remember, like I said before, is that, esports is a category. So there are so many games within that. The same person that likes rugby league or rugby union mightn't like the UFC. They mightn't like tennis. And it's very similar with esports. If you're a big fan of something like Fortnite, there's likely that you don't enjoy, one of the great games of esports like StarCraft 2. They're extremely different titles. The same way that you mightn't enjoy tennis and also freestyle diving at the same time.
And that esports team, is that again structured much like you'd expect a normal team of salaried staff or salaried employees, for want of a better expression, and if there's marketing bought in potentially for this profit, split of that revenue within the team.
Mm-hmm. And some direct examples for you in that case, in regards to some money that's happening through there. Some CEOs of esports teams are earning up to $600,000 a year at the moment.
Right.
You're seeing a lot of players, say, in the Call of Duty franchise league. So in the Call of Duty league, there's somewhere between 8 to 12 teams. I need to double check on that. That's a league that's run by the developer, Blizzard. Blizzard Activision, who are the people that make and market the game and publish the game. They have an installed minimum of $80,000 salaries per year for their players, and also minimum requirements. The players play in home and away games and series. So 3 to 4 teams will come together and play a home series together.
That being a large arena, would it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in an arena with 600 to 3,000 seats, depending on how popular the teams are, up to larger than that. They've got a lot of these teams will live in a house together, or they'll have their rent covered for them, and they'll play in an office. So they'll go into the office each day and train the same way that a traditional team will have a home ground, Twickenham Stadium or something like that. If you're a football fan, then above them they'll have a full structure. They'll have a team. Often they might have a part-time team psychologist and physiotherapist. A lot of these teams have mandated or recommended exercise regimes. Some of the teams might have a chef. They do in the Overwatch League, for example, which is another franchise league. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but a franchise spot for this league, this Call of Duty league, is around $25 million to purchase as a sticker price. And it's always a sticker price, but that's what's in the media, is around 25 million to purchase one of these. But you've got, and then like you were saying as well, you've got the full gambit of people that are in that organization as well. You've got marketers, community managers, social media. You've got, a COO, you've got a CFO, you've got maybe an internal and external legal team, management structure, that full kit and caboodle.
Yeah, it is amazing how much, it's not just a couple of people sat in front of a game, is it? And funnily enough, and then again, it's interesting learning. That's why I love doing these podcasts, learning about, you think about the well-being of the gamers is, I'm sure, important and built in. Mental health around the world continues to be a strong discussion, as it should be a strong discussion point, and I'm sure bleeds into this arena as well, which again will create work, employment for people as well. Just a whole sphere of things going on that you don't realise.
Yeah, and that's why I think the numbers are extremely important, and I always try to kind of talk onto those as much as possible. A lot of these esports teams are still raising capital and not cash flow positive as it currently stands. I believe off the top of my head, there's maybe 2 or 3, that are properly cash flow positive around the world in that tier 1 sphere, in the top 10, the top 15. Yeah. But, these influencers, like I was saying, they're, if you were to look at their margin, it's 98%. A lot of the time it's, or with the example of my friend, it's pretty much 100% margin he's making. Or, if there's a manager involved, they might be paying 10, 15% to that manager on a portion of their revenue. So net, that might be 10% or 5% or something like that too. So, this is one of the advantages of that. And it's really hard to get your head around. It took a lot of thinking for me, but if you think about it, someone like a Laserbeam with 270 plus million video views per month, him sitting in a bedroom playing on a $6,000 PC, which is likely given to him for free, having a single manager or 2 managers that work with him, has as much reach as an entire media organization. So when you first go, damn, it's $100,000 to $200,000 to purchase a dedicated video from him. That $100,000 to $200,000 drives you 5 to 10 million views from a hardcore audience who listen to this guy every single day and watch him and are entertained by him. So if you're purchasing that direct thing, let's say that you're in politics, let's say that you're in big media, let's say that you're in large, international brands. Let's say Toyota says, man, we're not reaching younger kids. We need to get them inspired to buy a Toyota when they grow up. Like, you'd be crazy not to look at someone like a Laserbeam to influence, and he's got a younger demographic. And I mean, that's the other advantage as well, is that you've got that specific demographic, because once again, if you're advertising on TV and there's a traditional show, there's a Big Brother on or something like that, the 55-year-old parents will be watching at the same time as their, 17-year-old children. But often there's gaming, and because of, everything's digital, you can track exactly who those demographics are. Yeah. So if you're going to work with, say, a Minecraft YouTuber who we work with, a lot of them have a younger audience. A lot of them are 9-year-olds to 15-year-olds that are watching that. So if you want to make a toys product, or you want to advertise something that's child safe and COPPA compliant, obviously, you can do that towards them. However, if you want to work with someone to reach, say, 35-year-old plus, in Australia, we have a specific creator for that. He was on TV for 10 years, and a lot of the people doing a video gaming show. So a lot of his fans are people that grew up watching this guy for a long period of time, but now they're older, they've got their own kids, but they have proper disposable income. So if you want to advertise an Australian SUV to be able to fit 3 to 4 kids in, I mean, go with Badjo Pants straight away, because that man was on TV for 12 years. He's got an Australian audience, and he kills it for any Australian things that we work with at high costs. You could sell. We have sold with him, campaigns on complete gaming computers, top of the range, because his audience trusts him. He uses them himself, but also they have that disposable income. So whether you want to target, a 9-year-old for a campaign to sell an action figure toy, or you want to target a 35-year-old who's about to have their second kid, you can do both of those through gaming. You just got to pick the right game, the right people to work with.
I think there's something, sound a bit corny, but something beautiful about that organic growth and that, and then that ability to, I don't know, in a world where there's a lot of, certainly a lot of talk about fake news, whether it is or not, and you don't know what to trust. Where there's a single individual building a reputation is everything to them as in isolation. So the fault points and I guess the fault points in regard to things going out that shouldn't feel very, because it's him or her deciding to do that, just makes it feel very raw and very pure maybe.
If you think about it this way,
power of that to me.
Yeah, sorry. And if you think about it this way, anyone can have a brand, right? Because you can buy advertising, you can buy marketing, but by definition, you can't be an influencer without fans.
Yeah.
So you have to already have those fans to become an influencer. Not anyone, but people, as we've seen, can raise 30, 40, 50, $100 million on a business that doesn't exist. Then they can create that, and then they can try to create their own hardcore audience and fans. But if you're working with an influencer, they've already done that. They've already got their fans.
That's why it feels so pure, because it's been flipped around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why some influencers and ex-pro players take a man called Matthew, or Nadeshot is his gamer name. He started an esports organization because he was a world champion caliber player. He was a large YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. He was a sponsored Red Bull athlete, one of the first gamers to ever be. I think he was the second, I believe. And then he went and started his own gaming team. And now Drake, probably the most popular rapper in the world, is an investor. Now Scooter Braun, Justin Bieber's manager, is an investor, and his gaming team, I would put them as number 1 or 2 in my teams to watch. 100 Thieves, besides FaZe Clan, FaZe and 100 Thieves are doing fantastic things, and they'll be the first. In my opinion, they'll potentially be the first $1 billion esports organizations a piece, because of their focus on content and culture and who they're partnering with. I think that they're going to get there. He comes from those humble beginnings, but he had that massive start compared to other organizations which started from the bottom, because he already had fans and he's already very passionate, and it comes through. That passion comes through in every single piece of content he does. You can see that he created his esports org because he was a player and he wants to look after players.
And in these, just a couple of questions to finish off, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The first of all is around within the sports and fairness. Is that, again, I recall seeing a story we talked about, or you talked about Formula One doing an esports race, and I think someone had switched out for a gamer, so there was an element of cheating going on. Ultimately, I think he got kicked out of the race. And I suppose that encompasses the bigger question of challenges within esports. Where do you see them at the moment?
So there's a few different challenges. One of the challenges is always just the extra, or upgrading the professionalism of esports. That's been something that people have been talking about for a long time. How do you fast track the growth of the industry to get to the point where even tier 2 people may be able to have sustainable income? And that's not necessarily realistic in the short term, because even, large global sports still don't have that. You don't have a tier 2 in tennis necessarily that people can sustain a proper income. You don't even have a tier 1.5 in MMA where people can sustain, a proper income, even though the UFC is, I believe it's its own claim now, the 3rd largest sport in the US. So other people are still tackling that. Some of the other issues as well are people are still sorting out the profitability. There's a lot of money there to be had. There's a lot of revenue to be had. There's a lot of investments but there's not a lot of cash flow positive companies purely in esports. And I think that the people who are going to be the cash flow positive ones now and into the future are those who focus a lot on casual and focus on telling stories. They focus on content, and they focus on influencers and merchandise just as much as anything else.
Right.
Because if you're looking at that phase example I gave you, if you can do $1 million worth of hoodies on a Sunday in an hour or two, and then somewhere around 2 million or more as a whole, that means you've got a real audience of fans that are wanting to buy things off you. You've got a real audience that you can, sell things to. So people like FaZe, for example, focus so much on content, and they're almost not even an esports team. They do so much content. They focus on content creators. They've got investment from like a literal laundry list of rappers. There's like 7 or something like that, all big names that are all invested into them.
Right.
And that's, where a lot of that will come from too. And we're going to see more of that expand. So many of these influencers are launching their own brands, their own products, their own esports team. The most subscribed YouTuber in Australia, Lachlan, who plays Fortnite, he's got slightly more subscribers than Laserbeam. He launched his own esports team. Their launch video has like 1.3 million views. Their first 4 videos have 1 million plus views each. And they literally only just existed. They went on to make a team, and then
amazing set of eyeballs, isn't it? Amazing numbers.
Yeah,
So,
and they'd already be cash flow positive just based off the CPM of those videos, most likely.
And that sort of ties into my last question where we talk about those challenges, and I guess from your perspective, you touched on at the beginning there about your development through your career to where you are now. What would you consider your primary sort of focus within the business you're running now? Is it a bit of all of the things you talked about today, or particular areas, and helping, I guess, a lot of those esports through those challenges as well that you just touched on?
Yeah, so in the past, it's definitely been all of it, but now we're starting to focus so much more. We're working with a few groups, one in Saudi Arabia, one in Spain, and across the US on some new business lines for them. One is an existing traditional big business that wants to get into the space through owning their own business. The other one is a VC-backed company that's looking at launching something new, completely different to anything they've done at the past in the space. And we'd like to get hands-on. The reason that the Saudi Arabian company chose us, they said in their own words, is we were the only people that said, hey, if we consult for you on this, we actually want to run it for you or with you as it progresses and goes forward. We want to kind of put our, not money where our mouth is, but put our thoughts or our ideas or our consultancy where our mouth is, and understanding there's always a place in traditional markets and such else for, a KPMG or a Deloitte to say, yes, this is a good idea. But we want to say, yes, this is a good idea, and we back you in, and we want to run it with you. We want a JV or, whatever it ends up being. And that's a lot of the focus for us, is bringing those new ideas into the space. And I can't talk directly about what it is, but, listening back to the talk, I've kind of put points throughout there most of the time about who I think is winning in the market, about, where some of the gaps lie in that kind of space and what people can do. We're also working on some other ways to help creators make more money in different ways. Creators will often have that track mind, and rightfully so, which is, I just got to make content. I've got to make it really good. And, that's their job, the same way that NFL's quarterback job is to throw the ball and not get hit. And, be fast and have a good arm and be accurate. But, there's some gaps there where, like I said, they are their own company almost. So how are they setting themselves up for the future? And this is the same question for esports players and, even sports professionals. It's a big thing that's going through the UFC and MMA audiences now, where fighters are going, damn, I'm making $50,000 to, $500,000 per fight, but that doesn't last forever. So I need to figure out what I'm doing after this. The same thing with the traditional sport. You've only got a certain amount of time that you are a content creator before you fall out of favor, before people stop following you or you lose your passion. You've only got a certain amount of time to be a professional gamer. When you get sick of playing 8 to 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, traveling 32 weeks of a year, which a lot of these guys do, there's only so long you can do that for before you have to hang up the mouse and keyboard or hang up the boots if you're a pro football player and your knees start to give out. So people are now starting to think about, okay, what can I do in the future? And a lot of that is launching your own companies. So we're seeing, say, makeup influencers launching their own makeup brands. We're seeing fitness influencers launch their own fitness apps. We're seeing, other people launch their own media organizations or esports teams or peripheral companies and things like that too. So just focusing on, investing money now into the future because it doesn't last forever.
No, absolutely. And people want to get in touch with you, Chris. What's the best way to do that on your website?
Yeah, so the website is bigesports.gg. GG is a play on a gaming colloquialism. It basically means good game. And it's good, just like a handshake. It's a digital handshake. Whenever you finish a game, whether it wasn't good or whether you absolutely destroyed them or they destroyed you and you're a little bit annoyed about that, it's still nice to say, it's good manners to say GG. Or for me, my online presence is mainly through LinkedIn. I create a lot of content on there, do our own podcasts, do LinkedIn live streams, which I'm going to do right now, another one with the man in Germany, and share a lot of industry information. My kind of philosophy on LinkedIn that I do there is I try to share information that's interesting to me. I try to boil it down so you don't have to read the whole article. You can just read 3 or 4 dot points from me, and then I'll add in extra information that you won't get, even if you were to open the article. But obviously I will link the article if people would like to read the full amount of information. So that's the value that I try to provide to people on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn URL is Smithy, my last name with a Y, Mayo, Smithy Mayo, one word. Or you can just look me up, Chris Smith. But, you know, a white man with the name Chris Smith, very common.
Yeah,
so
no,
good
absolutely.
Luck.
We'll add some links into our footnote. And I must say, so we connected a couple of maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago on LinkedIn. And I mean, I'm educating myself in esports as well. And yeah, certainly I'll testify that the bits you post, the snapshots really that whet the appetite and get you engaged. So yeah, I'd certainly recommend a follow as well. So thanks
fantastic.
for your time. I appreciate the education. I know you also run a podcast as well. Maybe you just shout out the podcast name as well and people can look up that.
No problem. Yes, that's the Big Esports podcast as well. And you can find that through our website or it's on any of the major streaming platforms.
And again, chatting to a variety of people through the industry.
Yep. Yeah. And focusing on the business side behind things, what's happening. So, we've talked to a series of players about, why do some esports players not take their social media presence as seriously as, business people think they should. Talking to esports team owners, talking to media organization owners. And tonight, that's who I'm talking to live on LinkedIn. And then that'll be repurposed into a podcast. He is the CEO and founder of the Esports Observer, which is a business-based esports publication, headquartered himself out of Germany. And be talking to him about some of his thoughts on the industry as well, and deep diving into some interesting topics that are happening in the space.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, like I say, much appreciated for your time. It's been really fascinating, and hopefully the audience found it of interest.
Yeah, happy to share some numbers always.
Man, thanks for listening, everyone.